Welcome, welcome, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. So good to see so many people here so fast on this amazing Thursday night. Maybe not the most amazing, but I think it's quite amazing we're here together to rise for freedom. Wish we could play some music for y'all. We're gonna work on that. But maybe you could play some music on your phone or something at home and jam out, rock out to your favorite songs. Or just imagine it. That's what I'll be doing. Okay, so looks like we'll start kind of just jumping into this. So, welcome everyone to the Rise for Freedom Zoom. Um, this is this is our first one essentially of this series, Common Room Training Series. So if this is your first call, welcome. If you came to our initial launch last week, then welcome back. And then I think we're gonna go ahead and jump into a little icebreaker. I mean, it's kind of a big icebreaker. It looks like Zoe already just dropped it in the chat. So essentially, when you think about advocating for democracy, who do you do it for? Is there someone you think of whose future you are working to protect? So we're really thinking about who is centering us in this work, who do we keep at the front of our mind, who is motivating us. I think we all, sometimes it can be a bit vulnerable, but we all have that story within us. And then also, while you're at it, you can drop these responses in the chat. Make sure you include your name, pronouns, where you're from, state. I can, I think maybe the chat's disabled, so I'm not sure if we want to change that. Or if we want to, let's see here. We might want to change
Chat
that.
is now enabled, but folks, yeah, so please answer the icebreaker in the chat if you're not in a group and if you're here with your first in person or you're on a Google Meet with some folks, you're on a FaceTime with some folks. We really want you to come together for these gatherings as you are able. So you can mute us or turn off the audio using the caret to the left of the audio button and check in with the person next to you if you're in a big group, and then come back in a minute or check in on the chat if you're not with other folks.
Yeah, so again, if you're with other people, you can go ahead and mute the call for a couple minutes. Do this in person with our icebreaker. Just to remind you, that is when you think about advocating for democracy, who do you do it for? And then if you are just here on your own, independent, go for using the webinar chat and adding your response there. I'm seeing a lot of great responses from a lot of different places: Chicago, Illinois. Margaret from Maryland's doing this for her children and grandson. I see Greg from San Diego, a lot of different places. Virginia, some Colorado. Shira said at this point, I do it for immigrants, but ultimately everyone. That definitely resonates with me. I'm sure many people here. Oh, wow. Someone has a group of 12 people, it seems like, that have tuned into this call. That's great. So, yeah, it's not just everyone here, but then many people have their own groups with their own buddies. So, really awesome to see everyone together in this movement. Someone said they're doing this for me. I love that. That's Diane. Definitely. Hopefully, a little bit for you too. Got some Midwest, Ohio. Great. So it seems like there's a lot of people here together in this movement from it seems like essentially every corner of this country. So that's really, really exciting. Um, also, I wanted to mention closed caption. If you need that, make sure to do that. I think you might be able to see a pinned chat, or here, it's on the screen right there. You can turn on live subscriptions, go to the bottom bar on Zoom, click more. You should see the CC option, caption, show captions. And then just going over our agenda. So we're doing if we could go back, yeah. So we're doing the icebreaker right now. Next, we'll get into onboarding and a review of our materials. After that, a bit of an orientation moment, context setting. Um, and then we are going to have, and we're going to have many different people who are a part of tonight's programming, including Akene, the Democracy Campaign Co-Director at Public Citizen. Really happy, excited that she's here. Justin from League of Conservation Voters, I believe, LCV. We also have Hannah Kessel, so she'll be helping. So we'll have someone discuss the digital hygiene. Jonathan Pinkney, we'll do a little Q&A session, and then I mentioned Hannah earlier. She's going to be one of our first speakers, and she's here from Working Families Power. So got a really great agenda for tonight, and then at the end for the new hosts, we'll go over Mobilize training just to make sure that you're able to navigate that and have a time for some questions. So I think let's go to the next slide and just take a second to thank our partners. It seems if you still want to discuss, okay, yeah. So there are our main partners. We're so grateful for the coordination coming from Women's March, League of Women Voters, Declaration for an American Democracy Coalition, all of these hands that are helping really make all of this possible. So really, really thankful for our partners. And then next up, as I kind of mentioned, is Akene Freechild, Democracy Campaign Co-Director at Public Citizen, and she's going to tell us a bit more about what this Rise for Training series is and what to expect.
Thank you so much, JJ. So good to be with all of you. Can go to the next slide. Welcome to the Rise for Freedom training series. This is Zoom to Common Room. So some of you have been here. We had a launch last week, so this is your second time, and you've got folks with you, either in the room with you or on Google Meet or FaceTime or some other way to connect if you're not able to gather in person tonight. And then some of you are brand new, and we're so excited that you joined us tonight. This movement is about being together. It is about being joyful. It is about not embracing the fear and isolation that folks who are moving us pretty rapidly in some ways towards autocracy would like you to feel. So we are here together to talk about how we can learn, we can strategize, we can gather to resist creeping autocracy or advancing autocracy in our country. And we're here in love. So we encourage you, if you are in your own space or you're considering gathering people for the next 7 weeks for this training series or some of those days as you're able to, for the next gathering, if you haven't tonight already, ask people to bring some snacks, some water. I know Ramadan is wrapping up and Eid is this weekend, so that might not have been a thing this week, but next week it will be. Bring big pieces of paper for people to brainstorm on and Post-its and pens if you really want to go all out. And you don't have to do any of this. You can just ask people to, hey, bring a pen and paper so we can brainstorm together. But if you'd like, there will be some activities in future trainings, not this week, but in future weeks, where we'll be asking you to use Post-its or jot down on paper your ideas together and brainstorm and talk to each other in the room or in the chat or in a gathering you've created online if you're not able to gather in person, because we want this to be really interactive. We're going to be interactive today as well through the Zoom medium and for folks in person. So welcome. Classrooms and are great for college students too. I didn't mention those, but we want to be in all ages across the political spectrums space for folks to organize. Next slide. And check out the chat for a bunch of links that you can copy and paste. So why are we doing this? We really want people to mobilize en masse to protect our freedoms and our democracy together. And we want to engage you and help you engage people in your communities for the first time, really ready to organize. And there are millions of those folks. And there are folks you know who probably didn't want to organize before. Maybe that's even you. And now they're ready and they need to be invited. So we want to engage folks. We want to educate folks. What does it mean to organize under an advancing autocracy or in a backsliding democracy? And we want to onboard new leaders and help train you as leaders if you aren't a leader already, or just learn how to organize in a slightly new or different environment. And then we want to energize you to get out there. We are promoting the April 5th hands-off mobilization. There's other mobilizations that are coming up, and we will promote those as well as we are able to get out there as you're able and make your voices heard. Next slide. So we did an in-person training in January. I think we need to go one more slide over. And we had about 500 people and it was fantastic. You can see JJ there at the training. And we want to bring that to you as much as we can. Next slide. Okay, so we do have an ethos, a way we want to be together that's really important. And we're going to go over this every training because it's so important. We want to be big tent, right? You can't protect or a democracy or push back against autocracy alone. You need to be together and we need to always be growing. So we welcome people who are progressive. This is for you. If you're conservative and you believe in American democracy and you want to see a democracy where everyone's voice can be heard, this is for you. If you're a moderate and you want to live in a thriving democracy, this is for you. You are welcome here. We are all devoted together to protect the democratic republic that we want to live in, and so many of us had been living in, and we want to stop Trump and Musk's power grab. So we're going to be love-centered. We're going to be loving towards each other. We're going to find joy and take breaks to find joy. We're going to focus on connection and being together. We're going to do continuous outreach and recruitment. So there's going to be an ask for an actual action on outreach every week. And it'll be easy, at least some of it, and some of it will be hard. We hope you'll challenge yourself. We're going to help you secure your data privacy and do some digital hygiene tips each week to help you just keep your stuff a little bit more private. Most of it maybe isn't going to be needed for you anytime soon, but it's a good practice in general, given the world we live in. And then if somebody does really upset you, we're creating a space where we know we disagree on really fundamental issues that we deeply care about. And we want to disagree about those issues in a democracy where we have equal voice and we vote and we compromise and we work through elected officials. We don't want to disagree about those issues in an autocracy, right? So if someone says something that really hurts you, call them in and talk to them one-on-one in the chat if you can. Of course, if you're in person, talk to them one-on-one. Do your best to try to work together. People can't fix issues they don't know about. So we're going to try to be loving as much as possible. We're going to try not to call out folks if we can call them in. And of course, flag for moderators if there's a problem. We do want to deal with that. We want people to feel cared for in the space. Okay, next slide. So we never support violent tactics here. This is a universe where we live in a universe where nonviolent direct action tactics, which are part of the response to autocratic moves and democratic backsliding around the world, these are part of the story of how different countries and people have been able to protect or move towards democracy. However, on these calls, we are not going to ask anyone to break the law, and we are not going to tell attendees how to do nonviolent direct action tactics. These trainings are nonpartisan, and we don't partner with party groups. So apologies, folks, if you are partisan and you applied to be a partner and didn't hear back, that's why, but you are very welcome as individuals. We're all welcome as people who live in America, in the United States of America, and want to live in a democracy. You just can't organize under a party label. Next slide. Okay, so we're in the onboarding right now. We're going to do some training and some conversation about what we're dealing with right now, some base setting for the trainings that are to come. Next week, we're going to talk about how we got here, and it'll be more interactive training about how we got here and what does it mean to organize under creeping or advancing autocracy. Week after that, we're going to talk about how we build critical mass. We need more people. We need a lot of people to mobilize to protect democracy. 3.5% is a number we often hear. We need to learn how to talk to people we disagree with so we can build bridges and keep everybody safe and disagree in a democracy. We need to harness our power to end political violence and repression. And if there is political violence and repression, we want to make that backfire. And there's ways to think about keeping people safe and also making sure it backfires in that training. May 1st, we're talking about mutual aid and structures for stronger local organizing. That'll be your 5th training together, hopefully, if you're gathering. And it's a great moment for you to think about, what is my role? I've learned a lot. Where do I want to plug in? And it might be supporting and it might be mobilizing or something in between. The next training is de-escalation, which will be helping you keep actions safe, and some other strategic organizing skills, but primarily focus on action safety and de-escalation. And then we'll have you vote on what you want our last training to be, or if you want to keep going, there's a lot of really great advanced content we can share with you. Next slide. Okay, so riseforfreedom.org is the site where you can go. You're seeing wonderful links that Zoe's posting in the chat, but you can also go to this website to find everything you need to sign up to host the kind of training that I'm talking about for people in person. It can be your spouse, it can be your bestie, it can be your neighbor. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, but you do want to be together if you can. And it also has the sign up form so you can post your event on Mobilize, which we'll talk about at the end of the call for folks who want to do that. You can post to Mobilize and not invite anyone except the people you want. You can have a private event, but you can use that link to make sure that you're reminding people, it texts people for you the day before and that kind of thing. It's kind of nice. Or you can post to Mobilize and have a public event and invite more people in to do trainings, which we encourage, but that's up to you. And then there's a toolkit with sample emails you can send people to invite them to your training, sample text, social media to promote the training series. So help us spread the word. We think this is great. And if you agree, I hope you share it. Next slide. I think that given the time, I'm going to talk about the host toolkit at the end, but encourage folks to check it out and use it. And we'll talk about it more later because I want to make sure we have time to hear from our amazing speakers. And I believe our next speaker is, oh, here's the forms I just went over again. Apologies. So there's a host Google form and Mobilize sign up form, and then the toolkit. All right, so talk to you about the Rise for Freedom training series. I hope that you're considering hosting or attending in the future. We're going to throw a poll up to see how you're feeling about this now. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. If you don't, it might be under more. Go ahead and vote. And the options are, will you host or help a friend host one or more Rise for Freedom trainings over the coming weeks every Thursday? It's 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 to 9 p.m. Central, 6 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific, 4 to 6 p.m. Alaska time, and Hawaii, I think you know from there. But the options are, yes, I'm filling out the host form. Yes, but I need to find a venue locally. I can't host at home or I don't want to. Maybe. And we'll follow up with all of the folks who answered those first 3 questions. Then a bunch of you are hosting or attending an April 5th hands-off event. That's fantastic. We love that. And some of you can't host or attend things and you're still doing what you can, and we appreciate that too. There's so many ways to be part of this movement. The most important thing is you show up in the way that works best for you and feels like your highest individual impact. ideally with other folks. So I'm going to give folks, we have 320 folks have voted out of everyone. While we're waiting for a little bit more voting to take place, I'll say if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. The chat moves very fast. The Q&A tool will allow us to get to those questions later. Okay, thank you so much. I'll just share the results because we're trying to do this democratically. We've got 30 people filling out the host form. That's so exciting. I think we have more than 30 people hosting already, so that's got to be 60 trainings all over the country. And then we have 122 people that are either a yes or a maybe. So we'll be following up with you. That's a huge number of trainings. Thank you so much. There's 114 of you that are hosting or attending April 5th, probably some of the earlier folks too. So thank you so much. That's fantastic. All right, next slide. Justin Kwasa, my colleague at the League of Conservation Voters representing Declaration for American Democracy today. I'd love to hear from you. What's going on with the SAVE Act?
Hey folks, yeah, that is going to be very embarrassing to look at that picture. Yeah. Anyway, how y'all doing? Justin Kwasi here in pronouns. Democracy Program Director at League of Conservation Voters, but also the grassroots working group leader for Declaration for American Democracy here in Washington, D.C. Just want to give you a quick update on kind of the big democracy bill that's moving forward this week. A lot has actually happened this week, but just for a little bit of background, the SAVE Act is an act that was actually introduced last year during the election. And basically what it is in order to register to vote, the SAVE Act makes you prove your citizenship. Now, while on the surface, this sounds like something that makes a lot of sense, it actually is repetitive and actually will disenfranchise millions of voters across the country. Ultimately, what this legislation does is say that you need to provide, when you register to vote, you need to provide in person proof of your citizenship. And ultimately, what that comes down to is either a passport or a birth certificate, not a driver's license, not a school ID, not a tribal ID, not your social security card. It needs to be one of those two pieces pieces of information, pieces of ID. And when you actually look at what that actually means, it does disenfranchise millions of people. Over 45% of Americans don't have a passport. There are some states out here that have 4 out of every 5 people don't have a passport. So having a passport is restrictive both in access as well as price, where you have to pay a lot of money in order to have a passport. In addition, numerous women, particularly women who change their name through marriage, will be disenfranchised because their birth certificate name does not match their now married name. And there's millions of other ways to do it. And this is all being done for generally what is kind of a racist thing, idea, that saying that there are people who aren't citizens that are voting in our elections. And this ties into the whole immigration concept that is going on currently and really trying to affect our voters our elections for that reason. So what we do know is that we have been waiting for this to come up in Congress, particularly coming up in the House, and we've been preparing against that. But 2 things have happened since then that have kind of switched our perspective of this. Number one, earlier this week, after numerous town halls and calls to legislatures and folks across the country, no matter what their political preference is, saying that this is a wrong bill, that this will disenfranchise them. Seeing that this might not pass in the Congress, the president, the administration recently issued an executive order that tried to basically implement this law as an executive order rather than legislation. So, I mean, one of the things it does, it still keeps the mandated proof of citizenship, but it also has those review state voter registration databases to potentially purge voters. It has federal law enforcement like the Attorney General enforce some of these illegal actions in order to purge folks, as well as it also restricts mail-in ballot. The mail-in ballot deadline, where if you don't have your ballot in by election day, even if it's postmarked by election day, it won't be counted. So it actually goes further beyond the SAVE Act, and it's extremely scary. ultimately, we know that the courts will take care of this executive order as it has for many executive orders. And so we're still asking people to really focus in on the SAVE Act. And so really there's three things that you can do in order to make sure that the SAVE Act does not become law through Congress. The first one is email Congress as petition. So I'm dropping that in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. We'll have those in the follow-up materials, but it's email or call or reach out to your members of Congress saying do not vote on the SAVE Act HR 22. The second thing is talk about this in your communities, talk about this on social media, encourage other people to speak out against this with their local election officials. And then the final thing is Common Cause is actually doing a series of phone bakes every single Tuesday against this. And so we can give you the tools, we can give you the resources in order to reach out to other people across the country, particularly in toss-up districts, or not toss-up districts, but in districts where we know that races are very close, in order to tell those legislatures to not vote for the SAVE Act. The final thing I'd say is that we thought that it was going to come up for a vote in the full House this past this upcoming week, because of all the great work that you all have already done in order to advocate against the SAVE Act. We know that it is, instead of being a full House vote, it is going back to committee where potentially there might be some amendments and other adjustments made. But we really know that this advocacy is working, and we know that these legislatures in Washington, D.C. are hearing you and are reacting based off of the amazing work that you're doing. And if we continue to push and stay together and continue to speak in one voice against this in meetings like this, and mobilize in person as well as online, we know that we'll be able to defeat this and continue to make our democracy stronger and continue to protect it against the threats that we are seeing in multiple areas. So with that being said, really appreciate you all giving me the time to update you on where the SAVE Act is. And I will pass it back to you, Akina.
Thank you so much, Justin. And I'm sure as we get the links, we'll put those in the chat for folks to take action, and if you haven't already.
Yeah, sorry. And one more thing for Robert. Yes, that can be filibustered in the Senate. That is part of the reason why it's so important for us to reach out to all of our members of Congress, is to let the senators know that like this is something that you need to filibuster and to hold the line in that sense. Sorry about that, Kenny. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, welcome any additions that you want to make. It's my pleasure to introduce Hannah Kessel from Working Families Power to talk about the hands-off mobilization on April 5th. Take it away, Hannah.
Thanks so much, and thanks, Justin, for that update. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah, she, her pronouns. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I work for Working Families Power. Looks like maybe the slides disappeared for a second, but we'll get them back up there. As folks have seen, as we're seeing before our very eyes, you know, Trump, Musk, and their billionaire friends are threatening federal programs like Medicaid that the working class relies on. They're threatening the Department of Education, and they want to fire essential workers. They want to shut our Social Security offices. They want to gut Medicaid and leave children, parents, families, veterans, people with disabilities, you know, without services that they need, that they rely on. And they want to lower taxes for the ultra rich at the same time. It's really sickening. And, you know, now is the time to say hands off Medicaid, hands off Social Security, hands off our public education, and really take our power back across the country in this really powerful moment for a nonpartisan movement, right? For us to build power together and come together across the country. So on April 5th, many of the organizations here today and others are working together to rally and protest across the country in dozens of different cities. You can head to handsoff2025.com to find an event near you and go ahead and sign up there. And if you're not near an existing event, you can also sign up to host one. And we have lots of resources and tools. We even have office hours for hosts to learn more and get all their questions answered. And so we really encourage you to either A, sign up for one that's near you that exists, or B, step up and really be a leader in your community and work with others to host an event on April 5th near you. And like I said, there's lots of support and resources for you when you step up and do that. Just let us know through the host sign up page on our website. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone for letting me be here and make this little pitch. And I'll pass things over to Pablo from Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Great little orientation there. So it's my pleasure this evening to give you the fun stuff, the networking stuff, the building out your capacity stuff. And I'm going to ask you to take out your phone and think to yourself about 3 people that you can text, and you can say to them something like, "Hi, I would like to know if you can join me next week. I'm sitting in this wonderful training that's teaching me how to organize for our freedom, for our democracy, and I'd like for you to join me. Can we talk about that?" I personally like to lead with the ask and then gives the explanation afterward. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to put yourself on, or I'll put myself on mute, and then text 3 friends. They could be people in your social network at church. They could be people that you're confident will take your text at work. They could be people that you know from your neighborhood or your condo association, or folks that you see at the gym. Whoever you think might be receptive to this invitation to join you in taking the training with us all next week. So I'll give you 3 minutes. I just want to say thank you for taking the challenge of this evening and using your telephone and thinking about the people that are in your network who might be invited into relationship on this project of building a pro-democracy movement to push back on the autocracy in our government and to help our democracy stop the backsliding. Thank you so much this evening.
Awesome. Thanks, Pablo. And if folks can finish up their texting, we're going to see how many folks you managed to text. That was not a very long time. So if you want to pledge to text a few more, this is your chance to commit to that too. How many people were you able to text? Or how many people are you going to text tonight? Awesome. Seems like a lot of people got 3 out, which is great for the amount of time. And 21 of you have done 8 or more texts or pledging to do 8 or more texts tonight. Thank you so much. Give you 10 more seconds to weigh in. And we'll end the poll. So most folks got to their 3 out of, I think that was the biggest group out of anyone. I wouldn't say most, but more people got 3 texts than anyone else. That was really fast, y'all. Thank you so much. And if you're still working on it, thank you as well. We're going to use phones again for those of you who have smartphones. I'm going to hand us to the amazing Eric Johnson from Corporate Accountability. He's the Technology and Security Director at Corporate Accountability, which focuses on stopping transnational corporations from devastating democracy, trampling human rights, and destroying the planet. Eric.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. As was just said, my name is Eric Johnson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with Corporate Accountability. In today's hygiene tip, we're going to go over how to use Signal, which is interesting timing if you've been paying attention to the news. Signal has been talked about a lot for all the wrong reasons, which I promise to touch on very briefly later. So what we're going to cover is, what is Signal? Why should I use it? I'll walk through how to install Signal on your cell phone. So if you don't have Signal installed on your cell phone right now, I recommend just holding on to it from our last session with Pablo. And then we'll cover a few best practices on how best to use Signal to keep your communications private. So if you go to the next slide, so to get Signal to work, the first thing you need to do is generally start with your cell phone. There are other ways that you can use Signal, but you want to download the app either from the Google Play or the App Store. And feel free to follow along. If I'm moving a little too quickly, that's okay. I'll send out some info after this. Once you've installed the app, you want to open it up. And if you actually go to the next slide for me, please, we'll go through these next steps. It's going to ask you first to allow access to your contacts. The good news is that Signal will not be able to have access to your contacts, but it will make your life easier. This is a choice you can make. You don't have to do it. If you go to the next slide, you will be asked to verify your phone number. So Signal, I'm seeing some hilarious things in the chat around the DoD. Signal does, by the way, connect to your phone number, which does allow some level of less autonomy than other apps, but we'll cover why we can get around that in a little bit later. So put in your phone number. Next slide, you'll have to type in a code. You've probably had to do this for other apps before. It should feel pretty familiar. And then if you go to the next slide, you're going to be asked to create a PIN. Now, what this does is it allows you to lock up Signal on your phone in case it gets stolen, something happens. It's a way to verify that it's actually you, that when you're using the device. So we go to the next slide. Now, here's an optional step that I suggest everybody take, which is to create a username. What this will do is it will basically give you the option to have that anonymity that Signal used to not offer around sharing your information. So Signal is rooted to your cell phone number, but if you create a username, you can create this QR code or an anonymous name that you can share out with people that can keep Signal more protected. And then
Eric, I'm going to stop you for a second. We're getting a bunch of questions about what is Signal in the first place.
Oh, great. You know what? I think I skipped actually the first slide. I just like ran right through it. If you don't mind going back a few steps. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think maybe I just missed one. Okay, so what is Signal? Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messaging, voice calling, and video calling app. What end-to-end encryption means is that while your data is in transit, essentially when it goes from one device to another, the data as it's in transit is undecipherable random text that's almost meaningless to anyone who tries to access it. And that's really important because there are lots of points where from my phone to the person that I want to message with, my data is going to run through. The other thing that's really great about Signal is that it means that because Signal is open source, we're able to independently verify the code and the security of Signal. So I saw some things in the chat about like Russia and other apps. So like Telegram, for example, is a end-to-end encryption app that is not entirely open source, which means that we can't look at the code and we don't know if there's any backdoors or loopholes that make it more vulnerable. It may sound like a bad thing that it's open source because anybody can look at how it works, but that's actually a really good thing. We want to be able to verify that there isn't some sort of weird backdoor into the actual data that's being held there. Signal doesn't have access to your data. They don't have anything they can turn over because they can't see what you're messaging. Signal does have its vulnerabilities though. So like I said, it's your data is encrypted in transit. What that means is that it's not encrypted on either end of the device. So on your phone or the other person's phone, if someone has access to your phone, they're going to be able to see those chats and that data, those calls, all the stuff that you may want to protect. And again, there's human error, as we've seen, where you need to know who you're talking to. You need to make sure that you do a couple things that we'll cover in a bit around best practices to make sure that people don't get access to your information. So that's the really short of it. It does do a lot more than that. In general, if you follow basic protocols around Signal, it is a really good, easy way to make your day-to-day communication a lot safer. So sorry I skipped over that. If we want to move ahead a couple slides, past all these ones with the pictures, great. So these are some like getting started on how to make sure Signal stays really secure and some best practices. This may seem really simple, but it's actually probably some of the most important information. So one is you want to keep your phone software and apps up to date. So that includes your Apple or Google, Android, any of those kind of software updates. As soon as you get them, you should update the software. That's because cybersecurity is a cat and mouse game of, I saw people talking about Pegasus. There's hackers, there's intelligence agencies that are seeking to exploit vulnerabilities. The security updates are your best bet on closing those loopholes and those backdoors into your phone. You should have a strong passcode on your phone. Again, if someone is able to break into your phone and actually like open it up, Signal is not going to do anything to protect you because they have your phone. They can see the same thing you do. And so that's why I would consider turning off Face ID, especially if you're going to events, because it can be used by taking someone like holding it up to your face and then they get into your phone. So one of the really good things about Signal that's underrated is using disappearing messages, which again are in the news, which I'll talk about in a minute. Having a message automatically disappear is something that can be really helpful. So if you want to share a password or something that's particularly private or anything that you don't want to have existing, one of the best things you can do is just make sure that data doesn't exist. If you have to use a cell phone app or a messaging app, just like make sure it gets deleted as quickly as possible. To use disappearing messages, if you go to the next slide, actually, we'll come back to this in a second. You just click on any chat that you're having at the very top and it'll open up this window on the left. Click on where it says disappearing messages, and then you can set a timer for how quickly things will disappear. It's not a bad idea to just apply this rule to almost all of your messages. I generally have a lot of my messages delete after 4 weeks because I don't need to access them anymore. And if we go one slide back to some of your point, people are like, why are we talking about Signal right now when it's in the news, given who's using it and why? One is like, it's pretty insecure if you make mistakes about who you're talking to. So you definitely want to make sure you know who's in your group. And there's additional features within Signal to verify that who you're talking to is actually who you're talking to, that I don't have time to get into detail here, but it's called safety numbers, which we can provide some resources for to actually make sure that you know who it is that you're talking to and that there's someone on the other end. The person on the other end isn't impersonating who you want to talk to. And then, yeah, I think that's actually most of what I wanted to cover. again, it's not perfect. There are things that can be used in a way where Signal does can be used incorrectly, but if you follow some pretty simple security tips, despite the bad press it's getting right now, it's actually a really effective tool for organizers to keep your data safe and secure. So this is some resources that we can share out a little bit later in the call. And then I'll try to go through some of the Q&A and answer your questions, but I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you so much, Eric. We're going to do another poll because we love to hear from you all, and we have too many folks to have an fully interactive meeting. But curious, do you use Signal already? What did you learn today, if not? Some folks use Signal, they don't realize that it doesn't protect them that well if you don't use disappearing messages for all your chats. Some folks didn't know you can create a QR code and a username so you don't have to share your phone number. Some folks are still figuring it out or deciding if it's for them, and that's great too. We're just offering you tools here. Nothing is required, of course. I'm going to give folks another 15 seconds to vote and we'll wrap. Looks like we have at least 150 people that were new to Signal today. That's awesome. We're going to have a lot of different things for everybody here. That's going to be new for some, old for others, and then the next thing it'll flip. All right, 2 more seconds to vote. I'll just share the results because I like being able to do that. Really good numbers here. Thank you all. All right, I'm gonna keep going. JJ, I'm gonna just introduce Jonathan since I have the floor. Professor Jonathan Pinkney is a widely published researcher on civil resistance, democracy, and peace building. Jonathan, do you want to start with your slides, or do you want to be full screen and come back to them?
I'll go full screen for a bit, and then we can go back to the slides. So.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Akini, and thanks so much to all of you for being here this evening. It's really wonderful to see so many people so passionate about learning more and getting trained to help protect, defend, and advance our democracy. A little bit about me, as Akini said, my name is Jonathan Pinkney. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a professor of political science, and I've been a researcher studying nonviolent resistance and its intersections with democracy for over a decade now, based in Texas. And so the fight for democracy is something that is very personal for me at the moment. And so what I want to do for the next 20 minutes or so is give you 3 key lessons from my own research, co-authored research with my colleague Claire Trilling, on how nonviolent resistance can help protect and repair American democracy. And to tell you a little bit, to sort of set the stage for how we went about doing this research, I want to share a troubling fact that many of you may be aware of, but perhaps some of you aren't, which is that creeping autocracy in the United States is not unique. This is part of a global trend that we've been observing around the world for a couple of decades now. Global democracy reached its peak in the early 2000s and has been in a sort of somewhat consistent state of decline ever since. We've seen significant democratic breakdowns in countries like Turkey, Hungary, Brazil, India, South Korea. Some of those cases have led to new authoritarian or autocratic regimes, whereas in other cases, those periods of backsliding have been reversed and democracy has been protected again. And just as there has been a lot of democratic decline, there has also been a lot of resistance against this decline. That there have been dozens, if not hundreds, of movements around the world that have sought to push back against rising autocracy in their countries and revitalize their democracy. And so the sort of driving principle of the research I'm going to share with you this evening is that we can gain insight from those lessons around the world, from people who have been where we are right now, and who have either successfully pushed back against rising autocracy or have attempted to push back and have failed to do so. And so in this research, there were 3 key questions that we wanted to address. So first was just, we wanted to understand, does nonviolent resistance work against democratic backsliding, against rising autocracy? Just basic question of efficacy. There's a lot of research that some of you may be familiar with on nonviolent resistance in the context of dictatorships that shows, for instance, that nonviolent resistance is more than twice as effective as at violent resistance in ending dictatorships. There's a lot of research that is focused on nonviolent resistance campaigns in sort of stable, established democracies. But up until recently, we didn't really know that much about how nonviolent resistance might work in the specific context of a democracy that is in the process of breaking down, a democracy where its institutions are being undermined and a sort of potential new autocratic regime might come about. So we really wanted to understand, again, just this basic question of, does it work? And then building from there, one key thing that we know from the existing research on nonviolent resistance is that one key factor in whether nonviolent resistance is going to succeed is whether a nonviolent movement can successfully shift the loyalty of what we call pillars of support. Now, what do I mean by pillars of support? Well, the basic insight behind this idea is that any government, any political regime, any authority structure, for that matter, needs groups and institutions that give it the resources and the power that it needs to sustain itself. So if you are the president, you don't have power unless people follow your orders. You don't have power unless you have a bureaucracy that will support you, security services that will carry out your orders. But beyond that, having outside forces that outside groups that will give you ideological or moral support or justification for your actions, businesses or other groups that will provide you with financial support, non-governmental organizations that will give you the policy ideas that you need to be able to advance your agenda. So every seemingly powerful figure, from dictators on down to, say, your local mayor, requires a complex network of different kinds of groups and institutions that are enabling them to do the things that they do, to be able to have the power that they have. And what we know from research on nonviolent resistance around the world is that it is most effective when it identifies the key pillars of support that are giving power to a government or political regime, and when it can successfully sort of shift those pillars' loyalty such that they are no longer giving that support, no longer granting that power. Nonviolent resistance works by breaking apart existing systems of power, deconstructing them so that something new and better can rise up in their place. And so in this research, our second, first we wanted to know, does nonviolent resistance work in democratic backsliding, rising autocracy? Second, we wanted to know more specifically, what are the most effective ways that nonviolent resistance movements during periods of democratic backsliding can shift the loyalty of key pillars of support? What works to convince groups, individuals, institutions that are supporting a would-be dictator to no longer support them? So that was our second big question. And then our third big question, kind of coming directly out of that, was, so if that works, if you manage to sort of shift the loyalty of a pillar of support such that they're no longer giving power to a would-be dictator, what are the most effective ways that those former pillars, the people who have now kind of are no longer supporting a would-be dictator, are now pushing back against them? What are the best ways that they can push back? What are the most effective ways that former pillars of support have pushed back against democratic backsliding? So those were our 3 questions. I'm going to give you three answers to them. But let me tell you a little bit about how we actually went about testing this. So based on kind of existing data on democracy from the Varieties of Democracy project, we put together a list of every time in the last 35 years since the end of the Cold War that a country went through a spell of democratic decline, where democratic institutions went through a sustained period of declining in quality, of being threatened, of being in a potential for a sort of a move to autocracy. And then we picked a random sample of those backsliding spells. And in that random sample, we conducted systematic data collection on a few key questions. So first, was there nonviolent resistance? In particular, was there a large sustained campaign of nonviolent resistance that sought to push back against democratic decline? Next, we looked at, were there attempts to shift the loyalty of some key pillars of support? In particular, in this project, we focused on business communities, faith groups, civic organizations, and veterans and security forces. I can tell you more about why if you're curious, but I'll just leave it there so what I talk about in a minute makes sense. So we looked at, were there attempts to shift the loyalty of those pillars of support? We looked at whether there was actual shifts in support. Did those attempts to shift the loyalty succeed? And then if those attempts to shift loyalty did succeed, what were the specific nonviolent resistance tactics that people from these former pillars of support used to push back against democratic backsliding? So that was kind of that was our setup. Now let me tell you what we found. And we can bring up the first slide that I shared. Okay, so what are you looking at here? So this is a breakdown of all of the periods of democratic backsliding that we looked at, broken down by what the final outcome of that period was, and also whether or not there was a major nonviolent civil resistance campaign that happened during that period. And I think just looking at these sort of basic numbers, you can see a pretty clear trend, particularly in sort of the leftmost set of columns, where you see the cases where democracy was protected, where in cases where democracy was protected, where it was sustained by the end of the sort of spell, that it is much more common for nonviolent resistance to happen. And there are a relatively small number of cases where democracy was protected, where there was no sort of sustained nonviolent resistance campaign. Now, this is I should say, this is just, we're just kind of like breaking apart the numbers here. But there's I'm a political scientist, and so anytime we find an initial pattern, we think about like, okay, well, how might this be wrong? How might this not actually be real? How can we make sure that this is actually reflecting what's really going on in the world? Because it might be the case that maybe nonviolent resistance campaigns just happen in sort of backsliding spells that were more likely to end in democracy anyway. And so we did some statistical modeling where we looked not just at during a period of democratic backsliding. And I see the question about what is a spell of democratic backsliding. So this is just a period of time where the level of democracy in a country is declining. And it goes on until the level of democracy stabilizes at a new level. So that could be going all the way, going down for a little bit and then coming back. That's our democracy protected. It could be democracy, the quality of democracy in a country declined a little bit, but it didn't end up in a sort of full-fledged new authoritarian dictatorship. Or it could be that the country is no longer a democracy in any meaningful way, and is now an authoritarian regime or a dictatorship. Good question. So we wanted to see, like, all right, not just if we don't just break apart the spells based on whether or not nonviolent resistance occurred, but we actually try and account for some of the other factors that might lead to whether or not we would have democracy at the end of one of these spells, whether or not democracy would be protected. Things like what was the level of political polarization, How long has this country been a democracy? That sort of thing. So we did some statistical modeling to try and see, trying to account for all of this other stuff. How, what is the actual effect of nonviolent resistance on protecting democracy? And I have a poll question to sort of gauge your insights about this. So I'm going to ask you, so if we account for other things that would be likely to affect whether or not democracy is going to be protected, how likely do you think it is that democracy will be protected without nonviolent civil resistance, without nonviolent resistance happening, without kind of organized opposition? How likely is it that democracy can be protected just through, say, normal institutional channels? And you got 4 options there in the percentage probability that democracy will be protected. And I am not able to see
Folks
how many
are
people have.
voting,
Okay, how many
and
people
they're
have voted?
overwhelmingly voting for 8% so far, but we got a 36% voting for 12%, 10% voting for 35%. This is hard to report, but I will share the results in 10 seconds. Can you see the results?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Yes, I think y'all have the correct insight here. The correct answer is 8%. In the absence of a organized nonviolent resistance campaign, if we kind of hold all of the other factors that tend to affect the protection of democracy at their sort of global average, then the probability of democracy being protected is only 8%. If you add a nonviolent civil resistance campaign, an organized campaign that is attempting to protect democracy against creeping autocracy, that rises to 52%. So, not a slam dunk, not a sort of easy, every nonviolent resistance campaign is going to succeed, but a very strong association with the protection of democracy. So this is a critical factor in whether or not democratic backsliding is going to end in the protection of democracy, or whether democracy is going to sort of continue to move towards autocracy. So there is, again, I think hopefully a motivating that can be a motivating finding, but also an important reminder to keep in mind that it's not enough to just say, go out in the streets and engage in resistance. There has to be sort of careful thinking, strategic planning, and critically intentional work to shift the loyalty of pillars of support if campaigns are going to succeed in protecting democracy. Which gets me to my next question, which is about the most effective strategy in shifting the loyalty of pillars of support. So we looked at a range of different kinds of things that movements have done to attempt to shift the loyalty of pillars of support, to move them away from supporting autocracy and back towards supporting democracy. We looked at sort of pressure tactics like protests, boycotts, strikes, that sort of thing. And we also looked at more bridge building or outreach-based tactics, more quiet negotiation, relationship building with people and institutions who are currently supporting a move towards autocracy. And so I have a second poll question for all of you, which is, what do you think was the most effective strategy in shifting the loyalty of pillars of support? And so maybe to clarify as well, effective in the sense of at the beginning of a period of democratic backsliding, of creeping autocracy, this pillar of support was more loyal, more dedicated to the autocratizing regime, and by the end of it, they were more supportive. They were more supportive of democracy.
And the options are protests and marches. Second option, quiet outreach and bridge building. Third option, statements of condemnation. Fourth option, strikes and boycotts. And we'll have this a little bit harder, so I'm giving people another few seconds to vote.
All right, interesting. We've got a wide distribution here. So the correct answer is number 2, is quiet outreach and bridge building. So in 39% of cases where we observed quiet outreach and bridge building towards pillars of support, that pillar of support was more supportive of democracy by the end of the democratic backsliding spell. The other more confrontational tactics like protests and marches, statements of condemnation, or strikes and boycotts were actually quite ineffective, at least as a primary strategy of attempting to shift the loyalty of pillars of support. In our data, what we observe is actually these tactics had a lower success rate in shifting loyalty than just cases where we observed no organized attempts to shift that pillar's loyalty at all. Now, I think it is important to put this finding in a little bit of context. So, the way that we collected this data, we were looking at sort of what was the primary thing that the movement did to attempt to shift that pillar's loyalty. So what was the sort of their most common strategy, their most dedicated strategy, the strategy that they directed the most effort towards. So this doesn't mean, for instance, that protests never work in shifting a pillar of support's loyalty, or that sort of strikes and boycotts don't work in shifting a pillar of support's loyalty. And there are certainly, we can observe cases where those have been successful. But without outreach, without this relationship building, then it is much more difficult to actually to have those loyalty shifts occur. And I can add some more. I can give some more detail on what do we mean by sort of outreach and bridge building strategies? As people are curious, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and give you the third key takeaway, which is this question of, so once a pillar of support's loyalty has been shifted, what are the most effective tactics that those pillars engage in? So you could think about this in terms of, if you are a person who is engaged in that kind of outreach, what should you be asking, a sort of current supporter of rising autocracy to do? Well, and again, we looked at a range of similar kinds of tactics. We looked at sort of quiet outreach and bridge building. We looked at protest. We looked at sort of more direct confrontational tactics like sit-ins, that sort of thing. And what we found is that among pillars, the most effective set of tactics were tactics of non-cooperation. So these are specifically tactics where the members of the pillar of support specifically withdraw the particular kinds of power that they were providing to the regime before. So it's less about public statements. It's less about kind of coming out and making kind of verbal or physical forms of protest. It really is about that kind of direct withdrawal of the specific forms of power, whether that's money, whether that's ideological support, that members of a pillar were providing before their loyalty was shifted. Okay, so to sum up, three key takeaways. First, organized, sustained nonviolent resistance is key in protecting against democratic backsliding and repairing democracy. Institutional strategies alone rarely work, but it's not a guarantee of success. It still requires careful strategizing, mobilizing across divides, and shifting the loyalty of pillars of support. So how can we shift the loyalty of pillars of support? Well, on average, strategies of outreach that involve relationship building, that involve building connection with pillars of support have been most effective in shifting that loyalty. It doesn't mean that other tactics should never be employed, but relationship building is a crucial part of that tactical repertoire. And finally, where can we be learning? What should we be asking people and groups in pillars to do? Well, there is variation here depending on the pillar, but strategies of non-cooperation have been on average the most effective. And this is particularly the case if we're talking about pillars like business communities or veterans and security forces. It's less about what people in sort of former pillars of support say. It's more about them standing in the way and refusing to continue to provide the kinds of resources and support that they were providing in the past. A lot more that we could say about any number of those things, and I see a lot of questions. I see a lot of questions coming up in the chat. So looking forward to discussing those. And thanks again for allowing me to share this research with you this evening.
All right. I don't know. You have so many questions. You're welcome to just answer some. I don't know if you wanted to speak to this last slide, but also Kaden has been collecting some that you might want to address.
Great. Yes, we have a lot in here. Let me see here.
I do think if you could, I know you just did review some of the pillars, but if you could make more precise, is a pillar of support, just generally speaking, anyone who's in power has to be supported by security forces and by business actors. So everyone in the business community is potentially in that pillar, or do you take away the people that are already resisting and say, look at everybody who's left in the business community and work on the neutral people and move them from neutral to your team? Is that how they should think about that supporting pillar as an example?
Yeah, great question. And I would say, I think at least potentially, everyone within the business community could be, providing certain kinds of support to rising autocracy. At least in this research, we focused on, sort of the whole spectrum of where different actors within these pillars fell. So are they kind of completely dedicated to supporting a regime that is breaking down democracy? Are they directly providing them with monetary support? Are they more or are they kind of just mostly supporting them? Are they kind of occasionally providing some kinds of monetary support, but not regularly? Or are they maybe just staying quiet in the face of violations of democratic norms? To all the way, are they occasionally making actions that are supportive of democracy, but occasionally they are sort of standing back and not engaging in sort of full-throated support of democracy? And so we looked at kind of, when we think about shifting loyalty, we were thinking about any kind of movement from sort of one side of that spectrum to the other side of the spectrum. So if you started out, completely supporting a would-be dictator and you moved towards being, just neutral, that's progress. That is a meaningful shift in loyalty. If you moved from, just kind of being quiet about declining democracy to vigorously speaking out in defense of democracy or taking action to protect democracy, that's also a relevant loyalty shift as well.
Fantastic. Somebody's asking, how important is it? Steve is asking, how important is it to start the civil resistance campaign early in the slide towards autocracy?
Very important. I will say that. This is not something from my own research. I should emphasize, but there is a much larger sort of set of research agenda on periods of democratic decline and rising autocracy. And if there is one overwhelming finding from that sort of broader political science literature, it is that the longer things decline, the longer the period of democratic decline continues, the harder it is going to be to turn it around. And in part, this is because democratic decline in the 21st century is generally a gradual process. It typically starts with, a would-be autocrat being elected, and then breaking down institutional safeguards. Once the institutional safeguards are broken down, then they start breaking down they have a free hand to start breaking down free and fair elections. Once they've broken down free and fair elections, essentially all that is left is civil resistance, and it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to engage in a civil resistance campaign to restore democracy when all of these sort of potential institutional and political allies have already been stripped of power. So the earlier the better is certainly the case in standing up against democratic decline and for the repair of democracy.
Thank you for that. A couple different folks, Karen being one of them, asked, can you describe in more detail outreach and bridge building?
Yes. And let me do this. Actually, there's a story that I love that illustrates this, and so I'll do it sort of through means of a story rather than a just kind of abstract definition. So in the paper where we published this research, we talked a lot about the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, which some of you may be familiar with. The details of this aren't particularly important, other than to say in the early 2000s, Ukraine was going through a period of democratic backsliding. Its democratic institutions were declining. There was a move to sort of consolidate power in a pro-Russian party. Now, as this sort of decline was happening, there was also a concerted campaign to push back against it that sort of peaked in what was later called the Orange Revolution. And one of the key figures in the Orange Revolution was a man named Vladimir Antonets. Now, Vladimir Antonets was formerly the head of the Ukrainian Air Force, and he had been pushed out from his position as the head of the Ukrainian Air Force because he opposed the democratic decline that the regime was engaged in. But because he had been this kind of career military figure, he was still very highly respected in the larger kind of veteran and military community around Ukraine. And so as eventually Vladimir Antonets made his way into the civil resistance campaign that was opposing democratic decline in Ukraine. And the role that they found for him was, they said, okay, you have all of these connections to the Ukrainian military and larger security services. And we want to make sure that when the moment comes for the peak of our movement, when we're going to be engaged in protests on the streets, that the military is not going to side with the government. They're going to stand up for democracy, and they're not going to fire on protesters. And so what they asked General Antonets to do was essentially to keep in touch with all of his old friends, his old sort of military buddies from his time in the Ukrainian Air Force. And so for a period of several months, essentially General Antonets was a sort of a mediator and a go-between between the political opposition and the Ukrainian military. And essentially he both sort of attempted to counter misinformation that the government was spreading about the opposition, telling military leaders like, no, it's not true that the people in the opposition are opposed to the military or hate the military. These are patriotic Ukrainian citizens, and attempting to sort of build this connection such that when in 2004 the kind of peak of the revolution happened and hundreds of thousands, millions of Ukrainians were on the streets, General Antonets could called up all of his friends who he had been kind of building this connection with between the military and the opposition, called up all of his military friends and convinced them to not fire on protesters, to declare that the military was neutral in this political struggle, which ended up being a sort of key factor in preventing government violence against that campaign and ultimately leading to that campaign's success.
Awesome. Stories are so helpful here. I think we'll go a little bit longer just because there's so many good questions here. And I will say that other trainings in this series are built to talk about the pillars, and this is not the last you're going to hear of the pillars, so don't worry if you feel like you have more questions. And also there's links to Professor Pinckney's website and more of these resources as well. There's a question about where you think we are in terms of our backsliding.
Great question. I think we're at the stage of the attack on institutions. Pretty clearly. I think what President Trump and his supporters learned in their first term is that if they wanted to engage in significant democratic backsliding, they were going to have to seize control of the institutions of American government, and that is what they are attempting to do. They are attempting to ensure that in a moment of constitutional crisis, the key pillars of support in the American government will obey their orders and not support the Constitution. That is what they are attempting to do. This is typically, again, this is the typical first stage in a period of significant democratic decline once a would-be dictator comes to power. If they are successful in doing this, then likely what will happen next is a concerted assault on free and fair elections. Now, there are elements of this that are already happening. There are moves towards this that are already happening. I expect if there is not kind of significant pushback in the next year or so, that this will be really significantly ramped up. And to the degree potentially that our sort of national level elections will no longer be considered free and fair.
I think there's confusion and a bunch of different questions about, okay, so what good is protest? Like, I think sometimes people are looking for one answer and you're giving a bunch of different answers, and it's maybe not clear which one's more important or how people should pick where to spend their time.
Great question. So there is a lot of, there are a lot of potential answers to that question. I think what I would emphasize is being part of a movement to defend democracy that is engaged in a wide variety of tactics that push back against attempts to subvert it is what is really, really crucial here. And protests in the street marches, demonstrations, that sort of thing, play an important role in those kinds of movements. It's largely a mobilizational role. Like this is street protests are a way to kind of bring people into the movement, to get people sort of socialized into the movement, and to some degree play a sort of signaling role that there is public opposition to democratic decline. A key weakness of a lot of movements, though, has been an overemphasis on street protest to the exclusion of other kinds of tactics as well. Tactics that more directly target those flows of power through pillars of support into political regimes. And so protesting is important. Protesting can help build a movement. It can send a message. But it can't be the end of what a movement does. A movement has to mix in with that other forms of nonviolent intervention or non-cooperation that are going to more directly disrupt those flows of power.
Thank you. So just to say, put this in context of the training series, we're going to talk about different approaches and there's roles for everyone. It's important to get out on the streets, but that's not adequate. It's important to build relationships, and some people are really good at that. If you have a lot of military families in your community that you can connect it to, veterans, maybe that's a really important role for you. Maybe that's the most important role, and maybe you should also protest. Or maybe you don't want to protest. That doesn't feel safe to you, but you're really good at supporting people who protest, watching kids so that people can go protest if they don't want to take their kids, providing meals for people who are under attack. People who've been fired unjustly for standing up for what's right, or immigrant families who are being targeted. So there's a lot of things that people can do. And I get like maybe you're hoping for one answer. We are going to talk through a lot of answers. We do think it's important to mobilize. That's why we're promoting April 5th. Please go do the protests on April 5th. There's 700. If there isn't one near you, please host one. And I just want to try to give you a chance to kind of sum up what you're seeing in the Q&A and sort of wrap so that we can wrap this part of the call. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just say, yeah, thanks again. This has been great. It's, again, like I said, it's so heartening to see so many folks engaged in this struggle. I'm always happy. I mean, you can find my a lot of my work on online. I think there have been some links dropped in here. I'm always happy to chat with activist groups to kind of help building this movement. So feel free to reach out, and thanks so much, Akini, for the invitation. And yeah, let's let's save our democracy because it needs it.
Yes, let's do it. This is so popular. We may vote and try to bring you back on to say there's so many questions and we want to respect people's time. But I think everyone, myself included, struggles with like what is contained in a pillar and what isn't. I think we have to think strategically in our groups, which is why we want you to gather in person or online with people in your actual community to think about who you know, who has influence, who has the most influence in your view, and what you can do. You don't need to map the entire world in order to make an influence in your sphere of influence. Someone is asking about NATO, for example, like unless you have, access to NATO, I'm not sure that, because NATO is an international thing, we're talking about power being held in the US. I'm not sure that would be a focus unless for some reason you feel like there's some strategic leverage there. But pillars of support exist in all governments, I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Finkney, and you just have to think strategically about what your piece can be. But we will be coming back to this. And thanks to everyone who asked questions. And Professor, if you're able to stay on and answer a few more, please do. Understand if you have to hop. So we have another piece of training for people who want to host these trainings. In the next 7 weeks, we'll have 2 hours. So that's pretty long. We will give you a break in the middle so you can rest and stretch and take care of your body and take care of yourself and chit chat with the people you invited to your gathering, whether it's online or in person. But we hope that you will host. And so we're going to talk about how to use Mobilize, which is our tool to allow you to host more easily. If you already know how to use Mobilize, check out the links that Zoe's been posting in the chat. Maybe she can bump them up for you, or go to riseforfreedom.org, rise the number 4 freedom.org, and sign up there to host an event on Mobilize. If you'd like to learn, get an amazing refresher from an expert, London Wiggins, on our public citizen team, we are going to do that now and take your questions about hosting. So feel free to hop off if you are already hosting and you're all set, or you're not going to be posting on Mobilize, and we'll move forward.
Hello, it's great to see you all again. My name's London. Nice to see you all. I'm gonna be sharing my screen now, just to give you a quick refresher on how to get in here and do the thing. Following up after Professor is very humbling experience. So hopefully it's all good and it works out. I'm gonna share with you how to post. I saw a lot of people were very engaged, so hopefully this has inspired you and you're able to host. So first thing that I did was go to riseforfreedom.org. That's our website. Kenny's spoken about it already, so I'm sure you've seen it. And if you just scroll down here, you'll be able to see sign up to host a training. That's the easiest way and the quickest way to get to it if you get confused or anything like that. It's going to take you to this page. So I'm going to share with you how to fill out all these boxes and just like getting it started and getting it going. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box below. So a lot of it is already pre-done already, which is hopefully really helpful for you. The basic information here is just the name of the event. If you'd like, you could put your city or your town or anything like that, and maybe people will be able to see it a bit closer to you. Then we have the description here. This basically has everything that we're doing, why we're doing it, what it's going to look like, and also the dates and the timeline, which can be helpful as well. And I did see someone in the chat ask for partners, and that's also here as well. Then we have event tags here. This is more for Mobilize than it is for you. No need to worry about that. So we'll skip that, and it is pre-filled as well, so no worries. And we'll go to visibility. I want to talk about this because I know some people might not be super comfortable with having a public event, and they might want to have it in their home and only have it for people that they know. If that's the case for you and you're interested in sort of having a more private event, you can make it a private one. You would just toggle the private marker here instead, and that way your event page will only be seen by people that you send this exact link to. This is helpful if you want to send reminders or anything like that. And it's a bit quicker than like sending text individually to people. So that could be why that would be useful. If you would like to host a public event, it's already going to be toggled there, so it'll look more like this. And for that, it will be promoted on our Mobilize as well as all the partners that you saw Mobilize as well. So you'd hopefully get like a lot of really good energized people at your event. Okay, so that's visibility. Then we have location. Most of these I want to say are in person, but regardless for location, the process is the same here. You're going to need to put your zip code. Unfortunately, Mobilize is weird. If you put your city and state, it's not going to accept it. It has to be a zip code. So I'm going to share here. Let's see. We'll do a state college zip code. So if you're familiar with University of Pennsylvania, then woo woo, and we're super happy. So we'll do that one. As you can see here, it has the zip, and then it's also going to just put it here as well. That's going to be the most useful part. If you put city and state, like I said, I don't know why it's not going to work. With that being said, if you're having a public event that you'd like to show and have other people join, but you don't necessarily want to give your location away just yet, and you kind of want us to use RSVPing, just to make sure there's legit or anything like that, then you can click this right here, and it says only attendees can see this location. So that would be what that's for. Or you can also not click it, and then everyone is welcome to join. So there's that. Then we have date and time here. You can see it in the description box, but I'll also scroll up so you can see it a bit better here. All of our trainings. So those are the event dates that we'd be doing. So I will do that here for date. I'll just put the 3rd for next week, and then we'll do a random time because we're saving time here. And then there's also capacity. This is very useful if you're in like a library or if you're somewhere that has a capacity limit. Just put 30, and then you can click repeat every week for a month. And then if you click that again, then it's going to go up to our date. Actually, this ends on the 8th, and our stuff ends on the 15th, but you could just add another time, and then that's when you would add the 15th. And as you can see, it has like all the dates that we're doing it, and the times are the same as well as capacity. But again, this is something that you can edit. Like it could be 39 one day. So whatever, it's up to you. I think the most important part here would just be like clicking the repeat every week for a month and clicking add another time. Both of those are kind of important, so you just don't have to manually do it. Then we'll move to communications. This is for Mobilize to contact you as well as for us at Public Citizen to contact you. If we just have any questions about your event, because maybe something was relayed through Mobilize a little weird, and we're just trying to clarify it for hosts, then we would probably call you that way. The people who register for your event are not able to see this, so there's that. It's just for us to see, just for us to sort of help you out there. Then for additional information for attendees here, it is optional. Don't mind the coming soon. It's not super accurate. It's information that you would send to attendees. So if your location is a little odd, like it's to the left of the dark alley, and then you make a right and you see a pink sign, that's your location. That's where you'd sort of put this information, just for people to be able to see it. Then we move down and we have primary language. This is for Mobilize generated text. So for signups or updates or anything like that, this is Mobilize part of it. So they have English and Spanish, so you would just toggle whichever one you'd like to use there. Then we move down to accessibility. A goal for us is to have all events be accessible as possible to anyone who wants to learn or participate. So we try to check that as often as possible, and then you can also add accessibility features here. You would be able to toggle them, whatever sort of relates to you. And if you have any more that aren't added here, you can also put it in optional as well. Then we're moving down slowly but surely. When you have the group chat section, so this is for attendees and organizers like yourself to be able to speak with one another anonymously, but through email. So it's going to show your first name and the first letter of your last initial, and then that's how you'd be able to speak with one another. So there's a bit of privacy there. And the email addresses, like I said, are anonymized. So sorry, not anonymously, but the emails, those are anonymous. With that being said, if you do have a co-host, someone that you're working on with this, then you would just add that here. As you can see, it says add a co-host. I clicked that already, so hopefully this will go by a bit quicker. First name, last name, email, that's all it's asking. If you have more than one co-host, you can just keep clicking and do your thing. And feel free to add them as well. As co-hosts, they'd be able to view the event, they'd be able to edit the event, they'd be able to view attendees of the event and all the things. So definitely very helpful if you're really busy and you just are interested in having someone help you out there. And we're almost done here. We're at the last part. So there are 3 ways to finalize your event. You can continue with Facebook, continue with Google, or continue with email. As you can see here, I clicked continue with email. So you just add your first name, your last name, and your email, and then you click host this event. With that being said, I am all done here. And I will look at the chat and answer as many questions about this as I can, if anyone has any. And with that, I will pass it to Kene.
Sure, I think Kaden might be managing calls too.
Yeah, I can also answer some questions, and also can take folks through the host toolkit if that sounds great. Awesome. So if you go to the Rise for Democracy or Rise for Freedom, excuse me, website, sharing my screen right now. And you're right here in the same area that London showed. You can also click on Host Toolkit and you'll be taken to the Host Toolkit. And this has all the information, all the resources you need to help promote your event. So after you've posted it to Mobilize, you're signed up to host a training, you'll be able to see a lot of quick links right here to get to those different materials and links and to sign up for a training and host one and find one. And then going down, we just have a quick overview of what the Rise for Freedom training series is about. Little notes about what we're including in these different trainings, our timeline, and we have some sample outreach emails that you can use. And so the sample outreach materials is probably going to be the most important part of this toolkit for you. But we have some outreach emails you can use. We have the red areas are where you can customize them or insert your own information or the information of your recipients, or where you're holding the training. So just make sure to edit those to your respective time zone and location. We also have tweets and sample Blue Sky messages that you can post. And we also have captions and graphics for Instagram and Facebook posts. And so these are actually Canva toolkits because everyone is holding trainings specifically to their location or their time zone. We have these different editable fields, and if you actually click on these Canva template links, you'll be able to customize your template to your training. So definitely make use of those and promote it on social media. And then we also have some quarter pagers and some full page posters for you to customize with some information of where to find the training. So here are some general Mobilize tips, most of which London just covered. We have some suggestions for your gatherings, what to include, whether it's flip chart paper or pens and paper, as Akine was mentioning earlier. Different outreach and recruitment tips on how to build capacity. The goal is that hopefully you're building your groups throughout the next 6 to 8 weeks. And so maybe you start off with 5 people at this training, but by the end of the 6 to 8 week training cycle, maybe you'll have 10, 12 people. And so we're collectively building momentum around this. So just like London went over, we also have a screenshot and instruction for the Mobilize, setting it up on Mobilize. And so feel free to always reference that if you ever have any questions. And then we also have just some more items to consider when planning your event. So this is just the overview of the toolkit. Again, it is at riseforfreedom.org, and you can also go to freedom.org/toolkit to access the toolkit. So that's a quick overview of that. And I would love to answer any questions. If you have questions about the toolkit, about Rise for Freedom, the training series, the format, about maybe even some of the content that was discussed today that's more relevant to the training series itself, feel free to put it in the questions and answers widget, the Q&A widget, and I can try to answer them right now. And forgive me, I probably won't have any answers to questions related to Professor Pickney's content, but happy to answer any questions about Mobilize.
Jan is asking about what the role of the host is.
Yeah, great question. So hosts are folks in their communities who are willing to offer their spaces, whether that's a living room or a common area. If you're a student, maybe you're a classroom, to gather folks to collectively participate in these trainings. What we're trying to do is build a lot of grassroots power. And so when we have a large virtual training, it's hard to break people out into virtual breakout groups, and you're not able to build trust within your community. So the format we're approaching this with is that local hosts, maybe it's just, it could be a local indivisible chapter, but even just anyone can gather folks, friends, family, community members, maybe community members from their faith-based groups into their living room, their common area, and then they collectively join the virtual training, this webinar. And so when we're breaking out in the engagement and interactive portions of the trainings, you're actually breaking out into the groups that you've gathered. And so you're building local trust. You're building, organizing, and mobilizing momentum with your community that you've gathered. So the role of the host is to, of course, hopefully provide and organize the space to make sure that what's going on Mobilize just is up to date, and posting the event to Mobilize, signing up to be a host, asking questions to us, the organizers, if they have any, and then also organizing the communities. And maybe you can delegate some things. We love delegation, and so don't try to burden yourself with all the tasks. You can try to rotate some of the responsibilities among the folks that you've gathered. So maybe you hold the training in your living room one week, and then you can figure out somebody else to hold it in their living room the next week. We don't want to burn out, right? We don't want to burn out so early in this resistance against Trump. And so we definitely want to delegate to more folks. So maybe you can have somebody be in charge of snacks, in charge of drinks. But yeah, make it fun, make it an opportunity to build community. And let me know if you have any other questions about hosting.
Sally Jones is asking, it sounds like some folks might be confused about virtual versus in person.
Yeah. So we have a few options for you. If you're creating an in-person training, then one person would join the Zoom, and then you can all sit around your TV in your common room and listen in. Another option is to just, maybe if you're in too rural of an area, to just join remotely. Or if there's not a training near you, you can just join by yourself. And hopefully with the different polls and the activities, there's still a level of engagement you can participate in. And then another option that we're really encouraging for folks who maybe are in rural areas and can't gather a community with them is create a Google Meet or create another Zoom where you are all on one Zoom and then you're also tuned into this webinar, perhaps on another computer or something or on your phone. And then you can all listen to what's going on here. And then when it's time to break out, you can discuss with the folks that have gathered on your Google Meet or Zoom. And unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to set up all different Google Meets and Zooms for folks who do want to do that on a local level. But we highly encourage you to figure out how to do it yourselves in a way that works. And so you can still get that human to human interaction and get the benefits of a breakout.
Right. So even though we'll share recordings and folks can do gatherings with the recordings if they want, our intention is for you to come live every Thursday. And you'll have the Zoom, but you could be in person, or you'll have, for folks who can't do in person, maybe a Google Meet. But everyone, the idea is we're all doing it together at the same time, unless you set up something separate, and that's for you to manage, because we can only do so much. We'll do as much as we can. Do you need to put the program together, or do we provide presenters? We provide the presenters. That's the
Yeah,
answer. We are the
we-
presenters. It will be just like this, except there'll be more moments where if Caden was your trainer, he'd be saying, okay, here's a slide with the activity. Now, if you are in the room with other people or in the virtual room with other people that you created separately from the Zoom, like Google Meet, FaceTime, WhatsApp group, go with them and do this exercise together. Maybe everyone writes down on Post-it notes like who they know who might be part of a pillar that's important, just as an example. And then the folks, you'll put this on mute and you'll go do that. And you'll have a set time. And when the timer goes off, you need to come back for the next part of training. And if you're online and you don't have a group, you're not working with anyone by phone or in person, or on Google Meet, then you're just going to participate in the chat. So you might have your pen and paper, you do the exercise by yourself. If you want to share, you put it in the chat, but you don't have to share it at all, or you can share it with someone else at another time. Hopefully that answers the question.
And I'm seeing a couple questions. One from Karen. You said you're the chair of a local grassroots org. You have 450 people in your list, and you don't want to host an event, but you encourage your members to sign up. Do you just send them the Rise for Freedom site to register? Yes, you can send them the Mobilize, and they can register to these webinar trainings here, and hopefully they're able to join. But if you do come to a point where you have capacity to host, we would love for you to put an event on the map. That'd be fantastic. Another question we're getting from William. You have contacts in leadership from the Democratic Town Committee. Shall you try to invite the Republican Town Committee? This is a nonpartisan event, so we're not trying to do outreach to partisan groups. We're here in our individual capacity. And so, if you haven't gotten a response from us in your party group and you wanted to partner on this and you haven't gotten a response, that's why. This is entirely 501c3. And so we're not involving political parties or their local committees.
However, if you know a person or people in your community that they may be liberal or they may be conservative, have a conversation with them. This is part of the bridging work, right? If you think this person, you're not sure how this person is feeling. Maybe they're kind of worried that it seems like the Trump administration is defying the courts, even though they might have voted for Trump. That's someone to bridge with. So I do think there's bridging activities to do, but we don't engage groups based on specifically their party, but obviously use your individual networks and groups that indicate a broad variety of people politically to engage. Thanks.
And then because this question has come up so often, I've tried to answer it in the chat as many times as possible. But yes, this meeting is being recorded, and we will send the link to the recording in a follow-up email. I will take a couple more questions about the general series, Rise for Freedom, any questions about hosting, any questions about maybe some of the future content that we'll discuss. So we'll take a few more questions in the Q&A box in the minutes we have left.
There's a question about multilingual resources. We welcome your suggestions. We don't have a large budget, but ideas for what works really well are very much welcome. And the email to send it to is democracyaction@citizen.org, and hopefully someone's throwing that in the chat for you. I don't see more Q&A questions about that we are equipped to answer as opposed to the professor, but encourage folks to check out the paper and his website if you want to learn more. Or come to the next training, we'll be talking about Pillar some more. Okay.
Awesome.
JJ, do you wanna, are you good to wrap, or do you see anything else, Kaden, you want to cover?
Not at the moment. Thank you all so much for your questions. We will definitely again follow up in an email with some of the links and resources and the recording of the meeting that we shared tonight. Thank you all so much to folks who are volunteering to host and gather their communities, and thanks to everyone who's joined tonight's training. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday, and I'll popcorn it back to JJ.
Thanks so much, Kaden, Akene, everyone who has been able to not only host and share all of this amazing information, but attend tonight's session. So yes, as Kaden mentioned, we hope to see you next week, Thursday, April 3rd, same time, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there or be square. We'll do a full 90-minute in-depth training on how we got here. We touched on these topics, but really this will be in-depth, especially how to organize under creeping autocracy. And again, just thank you so much for everyone who has been a part of this movement. And of course, you will see, if you just made it, if you weren't here for too long, we will be sending you a recording. And if you don't see anything in your inbox within the next 48 hours, democracyaction@citizen.org. You can email us and we'll make sure you get it. All right, and with that, I think that's our night.